Hello, my name is Jessica. I'm a clerk here at the Macedon Public Library, and I'm here today to bring you a book review of one of the newer young adult novels that have been recently published. Um, I was able to get first crack at reading this particular book. Unfortunately, we don't have it here on our shelves at Macedon, but you can get it through the Pioneer Systems Interlibrary loan. So the book that I am talking about today is called Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This is Erin Craig's second book, her first, which of course the name now is escaping me. Her first, The House of Salt and Sorrows, was a sort of dark retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, which was, I actually have that book at home. That one was quite enjoyable and interesting to read as well. This one, she takes on some themes of fairy tales, but it's not a retelling of any particular story. So just to give you an idea of what is going on in this book, there's a brief synopsis here that I found from Goodreads that I thought did a good job of summarizing what you can expect. So I'm just going to read this. It says, Ellery Downing lives in the quiet town of Amity Falls in the Black Spire mountain range, 5 narrow peaks stretching into the sky like a grasping hand, bordered by a nearly impenetrable forest from which the early townsfolk fought off the devils in the woods. To this day, visitors are few and rare, but when a supply party goes missing, some worry that the monsters that once stalked the region have returned. As fall turns to winter, more strange activities plague the town. They point to a tribe of devilish and mystical creatures who promise to fulfill the residents' deepest desires, however grand and impossible, for just a small favor. For their true intentions are much more sinister, and Ellery finds herself in a race against time before all of Amity Falls, her family, and the boy she loves goes up in flames. I gotta say that I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed reading it, particularly this time of the year. I mean, where we're situated here in upstate New York, we have a very similar weather situations going on is where the location in this book. The time period is for them is a bit more, I don't think they ever list a year. It's more sort of what you might call frontier times in which the people are reliant upon their own resources, what kind of food they can grow, cattle they can raise. But for most things, they need to send out supply runs to the nearby, or not nearby, but to the nearest city or town so that the people can make it through winter. And it was a good read for this time of year where we are, going into fall and into the winter months. It gave you that nice cozy fall feeling of, the weather turning colder and a bit more inhospitable, and how that plays into the story as well. What's interesting for me, that the reason that I was a bit surprised that I like this book so much, is that I'm not usually one for horror. And I would say that while this is a young adult book, and it rides that line between horror and fantasy, it has that very dark fantasy feel to it. So it's listed as ages 12 to 18. I would probably say that 12 is maybe on a little on the young side, but some more advanced 12-year-olds could certainly enjoy it. I felt that it was a bit more rode the line between YA and adult, but it was definitely YA. It was firmly in YA, but you could read it as an adult and still enjoy the story. Some thoughts that I wrote down here on this that I'm just gonna kind of keep referring to is, I found it to be that unique story that rides that line between horror and fantasy. Author Erin Craig's prose encompass the mundane drudgery of monotonous frontier life, the flowery romanticism of the fantastical, and the taut claustrophobic horror of mistrust in your friends and neighbors, and even in your own mind. What was so great about this book is that at its heart, it's a dark fairy tale feel to it, but it had that great high tension of people that are trapped in a particular location, um, that there isn't any escape, and that maybe you can't trust the people you thought you knew, and that they are different than you believed, and that the protagonist, being an 18-year-old girl, has always lived in this town. She knows her neighbors, she knows their lives. They have a very close-knit community. They have almost a type of religion about how they do things, how things are decided in the town, that it's always a community decision. And when neighbors start turning against neighbors, it starts to become a very frightening situation. I would say I was drawn in from page one, at first intrigued by the drowsy indolence of our protagonist, Ellery Downing's quiet life. Her initial joy in the first few pages of being invited into her father's sort of fraternity of family beekeeping. It's a job she usually reserved for her brother, and her brother is given more freedom than her to go off and sort of not necessarily do his chores, and to not have the responsibilities that she has. And there's some tension that gets um, drawn out there. But at first you're just sort of getting a look into her quiet life, and then by page 7 the story takes a sharp and unsettling turn when an injured horse, comes into town bearing some gruesome injuries, and the convening townsfolk have to come to the slow realization that their latest supply run before winter, um, that the men accompanying the supply run must have been killed. Otherwise, this horse wouldn't be here, and it wouldn't be in the condition that it is. And the injuries that it shows, um, were made by something much more dangerous and deadly than any known creatures in the woods. Um, I would say, as someone who has read a wide variety, this gave me the unsettling, like, atmospheric feeling of some Stephen King stories that I've read, which is pretty impressive, for a second novel by a relatively new author. But since it is a YA book, I feel like Craig balances that fine line between horror and keeping it young adult friendly. She never quite crosses into too much detail, but also without seeming to hold anything back. So it was a really good mix. You felt like the author wasn't writing down to her audience. Um, it was definitely a story that gave me goosebumps. I was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't really put it down. I read it in a day or two. Uh, I can't say that necessarily all the questions are answered satisfactorily by the end, but she does attempt to tie everything together. It's maybe not as tidy as it could be, but that didn't really bother me in the end. I like when some things are left, um, without maybe nitpicking every last little bit of explanation out of it. Um, you know, who are these creatures, and why are they there, and why, there are some things that you have to extrapolate the answer out for yourself. And I think that's fine. I think that the main story is wrapped up in a way that you can feel satisfied by the end. Um, I would say that this is probably one that I will reread in the future around this time of year. I usually have a few books that I kind of stick to certain seasons reading. And even though this one, it starts in autumn and it goes all the way through to the next spring, to me, I feel like it'll stay a fall read for me. And I would say I definitely would give it about a 4 or a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So I would definitely recommend, if you're in the market for a creepy YA fantasy horror, or just a fantasy horror type book, whether you're an adult or a young adult, I would definitely recommend Small Favors by Erin Craig. You can pick it up at any of our libraries in the Pioneer Library System if you have it sent in through Interlibrary Loan. You can have it sent here to Macedon. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this book. It was an enjoyable read, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. So I hope that gives you guys something new to read, and I hope you're all having a great fall, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.